Welcome to our webinar, Living with Glaucoma, a Caregiver's Perspective. My name is Brizette Castellanos, and I am the Manager of Outreach and Social Media at Glaucoma Research Foundation. Joining us today is Sky White. She is a therapist from Seattle. She earned a Master's of Social Work in 2016 and has been in private practice since 2020. In addition to her clinical experience, Ms. White facilitates support groups through the Center of Chronic Illness. After Ms. White's presentation, we will be joined by two caregivers for the Q&A portion of the program. We have Erica Ekman, who is the mother of two girls. One of them is Noah, who is 3 years old and was diagnosed with glaucoma in infancy. Erica lives in Florida with her family and runs a very successful digital marketing agency. Her influencer past and passion for advocacy have helped her spread education and awareness regarding glaucoma. We will also be joined by John Lewis Jr. John is a fourth-generation Ohioan and lawyer with extensive entrepreneurial experience. His wife, Judy, was diagnosed with glaucoma 25 years ago. Since then, he has been a dedicated care partner to her on her glaucoma journey. Please welcome Sky White.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sky, and thank you, Brizetta, for the introduction. And I'm here to talk about glaucoma and caregivers today. So we'll just jump in. As far as an agenda, I'm hoping that we can answer these four main questions today in this presentation. What does it mean to be a caregiver of a glaucoma patient? What can you do as a caregiver to help your loved one with glaucoma? What can the glaucoma patient do to help caregivers? And if we have some time, I'd like to go over some tips and strategies on dealing with the disease and with communication in general. So first of all, what does it mean to be a caregiver of a glaucoma patient? For the purpose of this presentation, a caregiver of a glaucoma patient is anyone who is partnering in care or providing care for a person with glaucoma. And this can be full or part-time caregiving or care partnering. I want to keep it pretty broad. And I also, just to kind of set the stage here, I want to offer this distinction between caregiver and care partner. This is a distinction that I've seen used in a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's spaces, as well as Parkinson's spaces. I think it really warrants a discussion in all or most caregiving spaces. And part of why I think it's important is that, the words we use matter. Naming our experience can provide both validation and normalization, and it can just make us feel a little more seen. So caregiver versus care partner. We can think of caregiving as, giving care, just like it suggests. Caregiver connotes being the sole party responsible for the care of another person, which sometimes truly is the most appropriate term and is accurate. I'm thinking particularly in circumstances where a parent is giving care for a child, whereas care partner just suggests more of a joint effort here. So acting together to make decisions whenever possible, checking in on each other's needs, and checking in can really work for any type of relationship. You can check in on your spouse that's helping with your care, with your daughter, neighbor, whoever. Open communication is important. So I'm just offering these two different phrases so you can all self-identify. And later on, I'll also be talking a little more about communication and partnership. And throughout this presentation, I'll be using both of these phrases. However, out of habit, I might use caregiver only. If I do, I apologize in advance. Common issues for caregivers and care partners. prioritizing others' needs over their own needs. It can be really easy as a caregiver to focus on the person that you're caring for and just focus less on time for yourself. And when I talk about time for yourself, I don't only mean self-care in terms of doing things you like to do. I also mean your own physical health, your own mental health, and your emotional health as well. Loss of self-identity. A lot of times with caregivers, what I see in my work, the self-identity can become providing care, and you start to lose other aspects of your identity. Not that that's irreversible by any means, but it's something that I see. Positive activities are reduced. I have a statistic here that I pulled from caregiver.org. Regardless of employment status, unpaid caregivers report that positive activities in their respective daily lives are reduced by 27.2% as a result of their caregiving responsibilities. And this effect is 3 times greater in their personal lives than in their professional lives. This can lead to symptoms of depression. Another statistic here really quick, 40 to 70% of family caregivers have significant symptoms of depression. About a quarter to a half of these caregivers meet the diagnostic criteria for major depression, which I think is just important to notice, because when we focus on other things, when we deprioritize ourselves, other issues can come up. I wanted to talk just a little bit about burnout and compassion fatigue as well. What can happen is just feeling overwhelmed by caregiving needs and feeling unable to continue to care for others due to overwhelm, due to compassion fatigue. And again, this doesn't happen to everybody, but is something that I see with folks. Other common issues: hypervigilance, feeling constantly on guard or on edge, feelings of uncertainty due to medical condition or needs, and just uncertain of what's coming next. Differences in coping styles. What I mean by this one is that a care partner might have a very different coping style from the person they're caring for, which just can cause some strife in the relationship. For example, if one of you needs time alone after a stressful event, and the other one might need to verbally process, then that can cause some headbutting. Another thing that can happen is role change. For example, as in caring for spouses, or a parent caring for an adult child. And similarly, a role reversal, which we see in the example of an adult child caring for a parent. What can you do as a caregiver or a care partner to help your loved one with glaucoma? So I'll jump in, but I want to just be mindful that we've got 2 folks who are living the caregiving experience. So I'm not going to give too many specific examples of how you can care partner or caregive for a glaucoma patient. I'll more talk generally and leave that to the caregivers who will have speak later. But I did want to make sure that we talk about considering the patient's needs as a full human, not just as a sick person, a disabled person, anything like that. We want to think of them as, a human being with multifaceted needs. So, medical needs, obviously, that's why we're here. We're talking specifically about folks with glaucoma, with a medical condition, right? So as far as medical needs, things that you can do, you can help recover from surgery and procedures. Obviously, you can attend doctor's appointments, and there you can do things like take notes, make sure you're asking questions and advocating for your loved one's needs. Physical needs, providing or arranging transportation for appointments, errands, or other activities, determining how to get things like groceries or other needs met. And also physical needs, I'm thinking about like addressing the safety of the house, however that looks in your particular situation. Social needs, encouraging and assisting in getting out of the home regularly, not only for appointments and errands, but for things that the patient might enjoy. And also, perhaps if they don't know what they might want to do, maybe that's something you can help them figure out how they would like to socialize and what they need to prioritize. And spiritual needs, encouraging and assisting folks in accessing services or community. But the main thing really that I wanted to talk about coming in as a therapist is emotional support. What a care partner or a caregiver can do for a glaucoma patient in terms of their emotional needs. New diagnoses and also loss of abilities can both cause really big feelings and even a grieving process. And really, with big feelings and with grief, what we can do is allow them to process and allow them to move through our bodies so that we can fully feel them and they can move on. So as far as what we can do when somebody's having grief, having really big feelings, is listen and validate. So in general, it's not helpful to discourage folks from feeling. I know it's really common to say things like, oh, don't be sad or stop crying. These don't tend to work very well, particularly for things like grief. Statements that are more like, oh, it makes sense that you're angry. It makes sense that you're sad and you're allowed to feel this way. Statements that validate are more likely to encourage a healthy processing of emotions. Other things that you can do as the caregiver, encourage use of coping skills, some kind of general coping skills that help. Deep breathing, as simple as it sounds, is really effective for calming our nervous systems. If we have time towards the end of my presentation, I'll talk about some calming skills, but also, other examples of coping skills are engaging in activities that you enjoy. So things like watching a show, listening to music that you enjoy, having some tea, just anything to kind of reset our nervous system and calm us down. And of course, you can speak to the patient about what might help them. I also like to throw this in here that suggesting professional help when appropriate is really important. When appropriate is going to look different for everybody, but I kind of like to think of it as when you're feeling stuck and unable to move forward, then it might be time to look into mental health treatment, a therapist, something like that. So what can the glaucoma patient do to help the caregivers and care partners? This will be different for every situation. It's hard to say a blanket of what's going to help, but things that I think are useful from kind of an emotional perspective and mental health perspective are encouraging the caregiver or care partner to spend time on and for themselves. And again, that's not just in activities they enjoy, but also in their own medical care, their own mental health care, taking care of their bodies and all the needs that we talked about earlier. Engaging in activities they enjoy too. Other things that the glaucoma patient might be able to do are just things that are within the patient's abilities. Maintaining independence whenever possible. That's good for both parties here. I think in any relationship, friendships, spouses, family relationships, whatever, it's important to consider each other's needs. And I think particularly in a carer partnering caregiving relationship, it's really important to have open communication about what each of you needs. Relationships require reciprocity or give and take to be mutually fulfilling for all parties. So consider consider what give and take might look like when there's care partnering involved in your situation and what you can do for each other. So particularly, what can you as a patient do for your care partner? Is this providing emotional support or encouragement? I mean, you'll know yourself best. What can you offer? So I'll move on to some tips and strategies. I want to talk a little more specifically about communication and about healthy communication specifically. I've got a few kind of key concepts here. And intent versus impact, I think, can be really important. Our intentions can be good, but our impact is really what matters most. So we can think of that as we'll come up with something in our heads, and how we want to phrase it will have to go through what I like to think of as a filter, and that filter is your personality, your life experience, and just you as an individual. And it has to come out your mouth and go into somebody else's, through their filter and into their ears and brain. And it has to get filtered through their life experience and their personality and who they are as an individual. So how you might mean something might not be how it's received and impacted. And a lot of times that can just kind of look like a miscommunication. So I think when there's a mismatch there between intention and impact, it's important to believe each other when your well-intentioned statement had a negative impact and apologize when appropriate. I statements are really helpful as well. Basically, an I statement is switching around blaming language to be more about you. So what I mean by that is changing something like you pissed me off into I'm upset at you or something like that. It's kind of a goofy example, but making it more about yourself than about the other person. Normalize brief informal check-ins. So what I mean by this is I have the examples written down of asking questions like, do you have capacity for me to vent right now? So checking in with the other person before you just launch into a vent session. Or on the receiving end, perhaps you can say something like, I'm not able to have this conversation right now. Can we talk about this later? After dinner or something like that. It's also important to listen and try to see the other person's point of view, and taking breaks when you need if you're unable to respond in a way that you will feel good about later. And I think a caveat to this is making an agreement to return to the conversation later. So not just saying, I need a break and never returning to it, but I need a break. Can we talk about this in 2 hours or tomorrow or something? So I talked about having a conversation about care partnerships earlier. I talked about it a little bit. I want to more specifically offer some guiding questions about like how you could structure a conversation about care partnership. So I think important questions are, what can the patient do independently? What do they need assistance with? What can the care partner offer? How much capacity does the care partner have? And in addition to that, I think about the concept of a care web, which some of you might be familiar with. A care web is basically just expanding your idea of who you can check in with about care if you have any needs. So perhaps other people need to be recruited into the care web for a ride to a doctor's appointment or something like that. Other questions in the conversation about care partnership might be, what does the care partner need to care for themselves? What is the best way to check in with each other? And any other questions that might make sense for your situation. Gotta take a drink of water. Just piggybacking on that last thought too, I recognize that these conversations are really only going to work for two adult parties, or perhaps an adult and an older teen. These won't work as well for children, so I apologize for that. I wanted to also talk a little bit about emotions. This is called the feelings wheel. If you Google it, you can get a lovely, very big picture of it. And that's just a lot of the emotions that we feel, not all of them. So emotions are important because they give us information about the world and our experiences. And when we ignore our feelings, they can come out in ways that we don't want them to. So, it comes out in ways that we aren't proud of, like resentment or outbursts. They can come out physically, headaches, stomach aches, something like that. And they can even come out in anxiety or depression. I think it's also important to notice that while some feelings are less pleasurable than others, no feeling will physically harm you, and all feelings will eventually pass. I wanted to offer just a tool around coping with emotions, which I pulled this directly from a psychologist named Kristen Neff. She has done a lot of research on self-compassion, and I highly recommend her books if this feels like it gels with you. So her idea of self-compassion, she offers this tool that has three parts to it. And the three parts are noticing and acknowledging your feelings, validating your feelings, and connecting to the larger human experience, and reminding yourself that feelings are impermanent. So what this practically sounds like is, I'm feeling sad. I'm allowed to feel sad. And this is a moment of suffering, and it will pass. That last statement might not gel with you. You can change that around to whatever might make more sense for you and your brain. But just a way to connect to, you're not the only person in the world who has ever experienced suffering, and it does pass. A few other tools that folks use to cope with emotions: journaling, just being honest with yourself about your feelings, mindfulness or meditation. This doesn't get rid of your feelings, but it does increase your capacity for coping with them. Physical activity allows feelings to process by moving them through your body, through your nervous system. Art, other hobbies, connecting with others, friends, or connecting with folks that have a similar experience to yours. And of course, therapy if you feel you're having difficulty coping on your own. I wanted to offer just a couple calming skills to end here. This one is called cool air in, warm air out. Pretty simple. You just say to yourself, cool air in as you inhale, and warm air out as you exhale, and repeat as many times as needed. Another calming skill is, I like to call it take 5. You hold your palm out. I'm going to hold it up like this. You can hold it however you feel comfortable. You take one finger of your opposite hand, place it in the center of your palm, and trace your finger up your thumb as you inhale, and trace it back down your thumb as you exhale, and repeat with each finger, ending with your pinky. Repeat as many times as you need. Both of those are good for if you're anxious or perhaps agitated. This last one is better if you're having racing thoughts or difficulty moving on from a distressing thought. Pick a category, movies, countries, books, I don't really care. Can be anything. Begin with A and name one object belonging to the category for each letter of the alphabet. So I picked some movies there. Alice in Wonderland, Back to the Future, Cars, and so on. And I want to end with a few resources here. So, as mentioned, I facilitate a support group through the Center for Chronic Illness. They're free. I facilitate supporting loved ones the fourth Monday of each month. All of the support groups are free. You can join in where you are in the country. They offer a lot of support groups, so there might be one that fits even more or even better for you than this one. Feel free to check it out. There's a lot of other resources on that website as well. I also wanted to offer the Feelings Wheel if you're interested in that. And then I mentioned caregiver.org references, and that's all I have. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Sky. That was great. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions. And thank you to our panelists, Erica and John, for joining us. Erica and John, can you please start by introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your journey with glaucoma?
Sure, I can start. I'm Erica Ekman. My daughter Noah, as previously mentioned, was diagnosed with glaucoma when she was about 8 months old. I think I would be remiss to not explain like how we figured this out, because I think it's sort of my mission to educate people on how to, discover early diagnosis with this stuff, because it's the key to saving their vision. So I had noticed that Noah's eyes, whenever she would go out in the sun, would be incredibly sensitive, to the point that like one of them wouldn't even open, and it was just like constantly leaking fluid. She also had really, really big eyes that most people would just comment and say, oh my goodness, she looks like a Disney princess with those eyes. But something felt really off. We took her to the pediatrician. They had said maybe a clogged tear duct, come back in a month. Everything looked fine. We kept pushing for answers. We kept calling eye doctors who wouldn't see her because there was no real symptoms other than like her eyes would water. So finally, we found a doctor about an hour away who would see her. It was just an eye doctor for adults, but we were like really pushing because I just felt like something was wrong. I never expected glaucoma. I just felt like something wasn't right. And he took one look at her and was like, you need to rush to Bascom Palmer, which is a great eye hospital that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. That was close to us, and said, I think she has glaucoma, but I don't have the like things to look at babies. So we rushed her there, and turns out her pressure was in the 50s, and she was in surgery 2 days later, which without like catching it as early as we did, we would have had optic nerve damage, which thankfully we did not. So it's been kind of a journey ever since. I'm excited to share a little bit more through questions and answers.
Thank you, Erica. John, we'd love to hear from you.
I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I'm outside because it's a beautiful day today. Yeah, it's so privileged to be part of the glaucoma community. How did we start? Oh my gosh. So next week, or actually this week, this Thursday, is my wife and I, our 25th anniversary, wedding anniversary. And early on, she was diagnosed with glaucoma, thanks to a friend of mine that I have known all my life. I'm 62, and he was just an optometrist, and Judy went to see him, and he goes, oh my gosh, this is out of my league. You have glaucoma. You need to go see a specialist. So early on, this doc kind of said, this is it, so that began our journey. And I have to say, it's been an amazing thing. I have all sorts of cool bullet points that I hope to be able to share. And if not, if I can't get to it, anybody that is on the call or listens to this thing, afterwards, because Glaucoma Research Foundation has, after the fact, there's thousands and thousands of people that listen to these. I'm one of them. Um, so you can reach out to me if you want more detail. But it's been a great journey, and I think Eric and I have she's with a young child, and I'm with an adult. So we have kind of this nice balance, I think. And I
Yeah.
have to thank Sky too, right? And because, oh my gosh, I'm a caregiver to my mother-in-law, per your definition, and I'm the care partner to my wife, Judy. So I thanks for that kind of definition. But I have a lot more to share as we roll on.
Yeah, and we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So our first one is, do you have any suggestions specifically for parents? So this is for Erica. How can I best support my child who is blind from glaucoma to live their best life?
Wow. So that I haven't experienced that just because we didn't necessarily have like complete vision loss, but we are dealing with just vision issues as a result. And I think it's one of those things where I always try to position it is like it's her superpower. And I think that I try to explain to her that everyone is born in life with something, right? And that for Noah, that's her thing is that she's wearing glasses and her vision loss and her glaucoma. And I think just like the idea of like having the blindness, I know that other senses are heightened, right? So like she's a super taster or a super hearer or whatever it is that kind of
Mhm.
compensates as a result. And I think just like leaning into the positives of it all and what makes her so unique and special, or him, is going to be like just a tactic to kind of helping them get through the frustration of it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Our next question is, how do you keep your patience when things get hard? So this is open to everyone, really, John, Erica, Sky.
Patience. I think for me, it's to be aware of it. Because as Sky shared a couple things, I have all these notes, thanks to Sky, in different things, but we can become overwhelmed. And I think my wife Judy, who's the glaucoma patient, and myself do mindfulness meditation. It is fantastic to be more aware, more self-aware in the moment of what's happening. And it doesn't always happen, at least for me. She's better, I'm not. But if we are, that patience can kick in, or that awareness can kick in, and just calm down, because it's so easy as a caregiver to get overwhelmed, to get stressed out. Um, so for me, it's just being aware. And when I am, it's a great thing.
Thank you. Erica, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of patience, obviously with anything with little kids, like can try your patience. So add like a medical need on top of it. Sometimes
Mhm.
it can be really, really tough, especially when it's like, they need to do something like take a drop or wear their patch or their glasses or whatever it is. And like they're fighting it and giving you a hard time. And you're like, don't you understand that like this is supposed to help you? So I think just like whenever I approach those situations, I just do it from the understanding that like she doesn't know any better and your child doesn't
Mhm.
understand. And so like going at it from, because I think sometimes we can forget that because they are so smart and they're verbal and they're doing all these things, but at the end of the day, they've been on this earth for 3 years. So I think what helps me keep my patience is really just like going into the situation and understanding that like she doesn't really know what's going on, and like
Mm,
just talking her through every step of the way, and like knowing that like it might take a little bit longer, but like they require that, and I think as a result kind of model after that as they go on in their life. So I try really hard to just kind of just take my time with it.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I also have a thought if I could jump in.
Of course.
Um, so my main thought here is that won't always be able to keep your patience, and just normalizing that, and I think it's okay to lose your patience as long as you can come back to it.
mm.
So kind of like what John was talking about is noticing when it happens. And I think the key is finding your way back. And that's a lot more complicated than I'll be able to answer here. But um, just that, we're allowed to get frustrated, we're allowed to get upset. Um, we're allowed to have all those feelings, and we can find our way back to being patient and regulated and calm humans. We're it's not a permanent state.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people with glaucoma who are being helped by a friend help them? I want to make it easier for them and not be a burden. Um, Again, this one's open to all. I was
Oh,
just
look at
going to my
I wanted to look at my notes because I'm under pressure now
yeah.
because the glaucoma patient is sitting here listening. Judy, who's right here. We love the Glaucoma Research Foundation, so I'm under pressure. No,
Well, we could
I'm looking at
rephrase it
my
a little.
notes.
Maybe how have friends in your life been helpful to, your partners or in your situation, Erica, with your daughter? Maybe you
Yeah,
guys can speak to that.
I can definitely speak to that. I think the best friends that I've had have done a couple of things. So like obviously with infants, there's usually a lot of corrective surgeries. So we've gone through about five, I think. So just like having meals ready after those surgeries, things that Noah loves, just ready available is always super helpful. And I actually had some friends go and like design her special sunglasses, because her eyes were really sensitive, buy patches that have cool characters on them. So just like making the experience for them,
Mhm.
feeling extra special, was just like a really great way to support during those kind of crazy times.
I think for my wife Judy, she loves it when friends, family, colleagues kind of recognize and ask how she's doing. They kind of pretty much know if her eyesight is not good at that day or not. But that acknowledgement that it is an issue and how are you doing is a simple thing that shares compassion that
Yeah.
I think I know my wife really likes.
And we would love to hear, John, what Judy's vision is like now. Do you mind speaking to that a little
Oh,
bit?
sure. Let's see how it obviously
She
glaucoma
had
is
vision
just
loss.
yeah, vision loss for 25 years, so it's just going down.
Mhm.
Uh, and one of the things that I wanted to share for sure, and there's three or four other points, but there's you have to accept what's happening now. The present, the eyesight is what it is. But there is, I would also encourage and embrace, and Judy is the epitome of this, the embrace of the hope in the future. So there is so much clinical trials going on, so much innovation. So many people around the world are trying and working on glaucoma vision loss and to create a cure, let alone just drops, which, for her, drops have never worked. Never worked. So she's been to Germany, she's been to Toronto, she's been to New York, she's been to Stanford. She's really aggressive at looking at what the innovation is happening, and if she can, embracing clinical trials. So it's exciting to be part of that, and I'm kind of the driver. I'm the Uber driver. It's, but I also try to do, and I'll share another thing later on, I think, about how we as caregivers can change ophthalmology and change our communities in how they look at glaucoma. I'll share with that a little bit later, but a lot of great, I don't know. I'm always inspired about this stuff.
Thank you for sharing. Erica, you touched upon how you kind of talked to Noah about her superpower. We have a question here on how should I include or talk to my child about their glaucoma diagnosis? So do you have any plans for the future? Does Noah know that she has glaucoma?
Yeah, it's so funny you asked that because she really didn't up until her most recent surgery, just because like it was hard for like how do you communicate to someone who is pretty nonverbal? She's been going to the eye doctor every month since she's been born, sometimes every week. So she knows, she knows something, but like it's her normal, which is I think actually really beneficial. Like she doesn't know a time any different. But recently she actually said the word glaucoma for the first time, and it was the cutest thing ever because her pronunciation was cute. And it was like this sort of out of body experience that it's something that like I feel like I've been shouldering for her for so long. So to hear her like say it and acknowledge it for that first time was wild. But yeah, no, she knows she has it. She knows that the eye patches she wears makes her eyes stronger. And I think by communicating, like the patches were always a struggle until this like light bulb clicked within me to kind of share why we were using the eye patches. And I explained to her that like, she has glaucoma and one of her eyes isn't as strong because of some of the surgeries, and we have to make it stronger. And now they only say like if you can get her to an hour a day, you're great, but any more is a bonus. She'll keep them on for 2, 3, 4 hours and just tell everyone she's making her eyes stronger. And so I think knowledge is power. And I think even when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, like they get it. They just need to be explained it in a way that like they can digest it. So my plan is to continue to just be as honest as possible with her, and equip her with the knowledge and everything she needs to like, because someday I'm not going to be there to force her to wear her glasses, do her drops, or whatever it is. And like, I need to not just do it for her, but empower her to do it. So I think it's this balance of obviously not scaring them, but more empowering them and let them know, hey, we caught this. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't progress any further.
Yeah, I love the message of empowerment. And I got chills when you talked about her acknowledging her glaucoma.
Crazy. I almost cried when I talked about it, just because it was like to hear her say that word, like it was like, whoa, it's weird.
Okay, we have a question here for Sky. My husband was diagnosed with glaucoma in his teens. Is there a support group for juvenile glaucoma?
That's a great question. Not that I know of. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, though. What I will say is the Center for Chronic Illness is the nonprofit that I'm associated with. They have a lot of support groups, and there might be one that fits his experience, or at least feels like he could benefit from it. Um, they're changing all the time and we're adding more, so I can't keep up with all the ones that exist. But I'd encourage you to look there. And actually, I had a thought come up about the question about the supporting the friend. If I could also answer that really quickly,
Absolutely.
jumping back a little bit. Um, so, I think the best way to go about it is asking them what they need. We could throw out ideas, but I think what's going to be more effective is just talking to them about what they need. And I think, like what John was saying, just showing that you care is going to be really really great for them.
That's a great point. Thank you. What can be helpful for a caregiver or care partner to set up in their home to support a family member with glaucoma? Any adjustments you guys have made around the house to make it more accessible?
Sure, I'll start. Judy's young; she's early 50s, but um, we keep lights on in the house. There's way more lighting, and when she goes away on her business, because she's still the president and CEO of her company, so she's still traveling around the world. But when she's not home, our daughter and we kind of turn the lights down. But when she's there, it's a big difference. Because it I don't know. You think about walking. Um, for us, it's about crowded situations. She's a business owner. She has a lot of big events. And if we're at a big event with a lot of people, that is not good for her. So she's on my arm.
Mhm.
I'm right there with her because she can't navigate as well. So it's just being sensitive and again compassionate to the situation. Um, so our home is definitely more lighted when she's around than when she's not. And I don't know if there's much more we do around here, but it's helpful for sure.
Thank you.
So for us, we've done a couple of like very small things. So one, like going kind of what John was saying about lights, we have dimmers, just because actually Noah's one of her symptoms is like real sensitivity to light. So in the mornings, I can't just like flip on the lights. I have to like kind of slowly bring them up for her. And then just to make things more fun, we have like an area where we have like a couple of different glasses options for her. We have her fancies, we call them her fancies. And so she will wear those if it's like, and then we have some that like are better for outside. And so she could kind of go and like pick which ones are best to her. And then we also have an area to line up her patches with all the different patterns so she can make the decision about like which patch she wants to choose today. So just like little things to make something that could feel like maybe not so fun, like a little bit more fun.
I'm also thinking about pointing out where any like potential trip hazards are or anything that just isn't easily seen that someone with low vision might bump into. Um, if it's somebody visiting your home, maybe depending on how close they are, maybe you don't want to necessarily mark it with like tape or something, but letting them know or making it evident in some way. And I also think probably keeping things less cluttered, just so there's not as many things to bump into, run into. I mean, this particular isn't my area of expertise, but just a few thoughts at the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Being
It's totally
mindful.
kind of similar, Sky. Judy and I were at a meditation walk, a fundraising thing this past weekend, and part of the path went through this wooded area, and they had like painted in orange, kind of like a bright orange color, all the roots on the path. Now, for most people, they don't really care. I thought this was fantastic, and so did Judy, because she could see the roots that were coming up versus tripping on them. So I thought that it had nothing to do with glaucoma. It really didn't. But it made a big difference for her. So, little things that we could do as caregivers if we're part of groups to think about those with vision loss or vision whatever is helpful. It really makes a big difference for people.
Absolutely. Being mindful of where people will be stepping or getting things out of their way is a great first step. We have another question here. Since I don't have glaucoma, it can be hard to fully understand their experience. How can I make space for them to share more about their experience and show them that they are not alone? I think we touched a little bit on this about one, asking them what they need, but also how they're feeling and showing compassion. Are there any other ways to help someone talk about how they're feeling or share their experience?
I mean, I think asking and coming into the conversation with an air of curiosity, curiosity and openness. I think that when we come in with an air of curiosity versus an air of judgment or something like that, it really changes how we show up, and people can feel that. So being curious, being perhaps inquisitive, in a gentle way, asking questions about their experience. And also, I think it can be good to invite the conversation as opposed to, just jumping in. And what I mean by that is saying something like, hey, I would love to hear more about your experience sometime when you're open to having that conversation. As opposed to saying, tell me about your experience and assuming that they're ready for it.
So we have another question here. As a parent of a child with glaucoma, how do you balance wanting to do everything in your control to help with their glaucoma, but also recognizing the things that are out of your control? How do you take care of your own mental health?
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? Especially I think early on. I think Sky mentioned something earlier about like first recognizing that it's okay to not be okay. When I first got the diagnosis, like I was not okay. And I remember but Bascom Palmer connected me with a couple of parents who were kind of had gone through the first few months of it, which I think is the hardest because, right, you're like, first of all, what is glaucoma? I thought that that's what like my grandparents got. Like, why does my child have this? And what is it? What does it mean? And there's so many unknowns too, because it's like they tell you, okay, glaucoma, but until they get in there and like see what the optic nerve damage is, you have no idea what's going on. And so some of the best advice I had gotten early on was like, you're going to look back in a few months and like be like, okay, like everything is fine. It feels like routine and like it's so much less overwhelming. So I think just knowing that it's okay to not be okay, trusting your medical team, I think has always been harder for me because I do suffer with some health anxiety. So that like when you have your child that has something wrong, you could always want to like question everything, but really focusing on just like trusting the experts in this and finding a medical team that you're super, super comfortable with. And I think just being okay with the fact that like this is going to have its ups and downs and trying to just remember that like these things pass. And like, so in the moment, especially like right after a surgery or when a pressure flares up and you're back to the drops and doing everything, like know that it's a moment in time. And know that, I guess, to leave with one piece of advice is like, you are worthless unless you take care of yourself first. Like when you're on the airplanes and they have the oxygen mask drop down, and they tell you to put yours on before you assist your children. And it's like, it's true with this in everything in life. Like you have to take care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally in order to be a good caretaker for your child. And so just keep that in mind. I always tell myself like, because sometimes I'll have guilt about something or whatever. And I'm like, no, like I have to do this. I have to take care of myself if I'm going to show up for my child in the best way. So yeah, that's my thoughts there.
Thank you for sharing. And yeah, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, right? Our last question here. What do you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning?
I'll I'll start. I'll use that as an avenue to what I really, one of the key things I wanted to share. And that's about the innovation part of what's happening in and around glaucoma. Um, my wife is absolutely the most proactive, one of the most knowledgeable people in the world about glaucoma right now. She stuns doctors all the time. But as a caregiver, me, I think we all have a role too. So one, I would encourage all of us to explore what's happening out there in the new innovation in the clinical trials. It's not going to harm us for pretty much. It's not. Um, but let me share just an experience about me as a caregiver. Changed the entire community of Columbus, Ohio, thanks to the Glaucoma Research Foundation. Okay. So we're at the GLF, out in San Francisco 5 or 6, 7 years ago. And Judy's she's doing like some technical seminar that they have there. And I'm looking at these 20 exhibitors. And there's this company, which I'm sure we all know now, called Eye Care. And they had this little eye thingy that would take your eye pressure, your IOP. And, before this, we would go to the doctor, right? Once every quarter, twice a year. It's not good enough for many of us. They need more data. So I did, oh, this was really cool. So I said, Judy, come on, you got to check this out. Well, this was long before they had this in the US. So we had it shipped to the US through an eye doctor, and we still have it. It's like 30 feet away from me in her office, and she takes it 2 or 3 times a day. Amazing. What I'm sharing though about the caregiver, I was the caregiver. I found this, and the doctor in Columbus bought like 10 units 6, 7 years ago, changed the entire complexity of eye care in Columbus, Ohio. He started it, and then everybody else. Now they either rent them out or they loan them out for people that they want more data.
Yeah.
So us as caregivers can have an impact on our local community that we don't get maybe, or we don't understand, but we can if we're engaged. So I just really would encourage all of us to engage in the new innovation and engage your docs locally, because it can make a difference in each of our communities.
Thank you for sharing that story, John. Appreciate it. Erica, any last words?
Yeah, I think um two things. One thing is I wish I just knew that like it was going to be totally fine. I think there's sort of this like doom that comes over you the moment you get this diagnosis, especially when you have no idea what it means. And I kind of wish I could go back and tell myself like this is going to be fine. And I also wish I realized that like this wasn't going to be as big of a defining thing. I think sometimes in our head we like write the future or write the ending of a book before it's even happened, before we've allowed it to play out. And I wish that I didn't like spend so many months like writing an ending to a story that hadn't played out yet. And things have turned out significantly different than where my doom took me right away. And so just some advice for everyone, whether it's about glaucoma or anything in life, like to write an ending before it's happened is not doing anybody service. And if you're gonna write an ending, make it a good one, make it a happy one. So that's, I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. Great advice for glaucoma and everything in between. Sky, would you like to add to this?
I think John and Erica summed it up really well, and I love that final piece about if you have to write an ending, make it a happy one.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much, Sky, Erica, and John, for time to be with us today and for providing such insightful information to glaucoma patients, family members, and friends. And thank you to our attendees for your interest and support. If your question wasn't answered during today's webinar, please visit our website at www.glaucoma.org for more information. You can also email us at question@glaucoma.org. And thank you once again for being here and for joining us in our bold vision of a future free from glaucoma. Because of your continued partnership, the cure is truly in sight.